Welcome to Reading Between the Reels. I'm Craig Dickinson.
And I'm Matt Leader. Today on the show, we are taking a look at Army of Darkness, directed by Sam Raimi. So, Craig, what are some of your thoughts?
Matt, I love this movie. I didn't see this movie until it had been out for a while. I remember seeing the trailer in the theater, and I watched the trailer recently too, just to try and refresh my memory of how I felt first time in the theater. And the trailer is horrible. It
Mhm.
really is super cheesy, as is the movie. But the movie is not terrible, at least not in a bad way. And yeah, I don't watch it super frequently. I just happen to have watched it twice in the last couple months because I watched it recently with my son, and then it was like, oh, I want to do this movie for the show. It's a lot of fun, and there's some really interesting things, I think, filmmaking wise in this film as well. So, what about you, Matt? What are your some of your overall thoughts?
So, this is the first time I've ever seen Army of Darkness. And I hadn't even seen Evil Dead. Um, and I think there's like an Evil Dead 2. Is that right?
Yeah, this is actually Evil Dead 3.
3. Yeah. And so you had pitched this idea, and like I've seen parts of Evil Dead, and I believe Evil Dead 2, but never watched the full movie. So I was like, I'm up for whatever, but I haven't seen the previous ones. So is that going to be a problem? And I remember you saying like, no, not really. And I see
Yeah,
why now. Uh,
pretty good.
um, I really enjoyed it. It was not what I was expecting because it's nothing like what I remember from Evil Dead.
Nice.
Uh, at the same time, it's an absolutely horrible film in the best way possible. In the sense of like I had no idea where it was going, but I was along with the ride, and the effects were not good, but the badness of them made them like hilarious. So I was like, it's a good film. It's a good bad film. Yeah.
Yeah, they set out to make a bad film and succeeded.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about the effects, there's like the Ray Harryhausen stop motion skeletons and stuff like that. It's very much kind of an homage to that, like Jason and the Argonauts thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely cheaply made, but I think it wouldn't really work. It's so tongue in cheek. I don't know if it'd work if it looked better than it does. So that's part of its charm, I think.
It's definitely part of the charm. Like thinking about that, I think you probably could, but it wouldn't have the same magic as
Right.
like the cheesy skeletons, and maybe it would. Maybe you could make a modern day version of this. But it definitely, now that you mention like Jason and the Argonauts, it reminds me of that a lot now. It's got a very, I don't want to say like 80s vibe because there's plenty of movies in the 80s that have good effects. But it's like, it feels like it's from an older time, but at the same time, more modern in the sarcasm, if that's the right
Yeah.
word, where
Yeah.
it's pretty biting, like in a funny way, but it's pretty biting humor.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, you mentioned that you hadn't seen any of the other movies before, maybe pieces of it. I'm trying to remember the order that I saw it in. I believe I saw Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn first, and then this, and then went back and watched the original Evil Dead because in the late 90s when I saw these films, like it was VHS and kind of hard to come by and when there wasn't any streaming. So I think that was the biggest reason we waited. My college roommates and I had waited to see Evil Dead was it was hard to find. You just couldn't find it anywhere. And that's
Mm-hmm.
just not the case anymore. But of course, you get that great clips. There's some footage from Evil Dead 2 at the beginning of this film,
Right.
so that does kind of catch you up too. And you have the voiceover exposition just skip down there just a tiny little bit. That they do have enough. That's why I knew you'd be able to catch up pretty quickly. Plus, it doesn't really matter if
No,
you've seen the
it
previous
doesn't
movies.
at all.
it's,
Really.
it's fairly self-contained
Yeah.
in that regard. Did you have cinema? I think cinematography is great in this film. I think it's really interesting. It's by Bill Pope, who we've talked about before. He did the Matrix trilogy, and he worked on Spider-Man 2. and 3. So we've talked about him before. He also did Shang-Chi, and he's going to do the upcoming Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. So I'm a big fan of his work. There's a lot of interesting things that he's done. Anything that jumped out to you regarding cinematography?
Yeah. And for me, that was the most like interesting part of the movie from like an analysis perspective, was the cinematography, because it was so unexpected. The big thing for me was how energetic the camera was. It was all over the place. It had way too much caffeine. It was jumping around, like bouncing off the walls. There were zoom ins, there were zoom outs. It was like jerking left and jerking right. The most unusual part was following the arrows. Like there's multiple times when they follow arrows, or I think it's a fork, but it's basically like a pitchfork, right? And Ash throws it, and like it follows that. There's shots that I could only describe it right now as like GoPro shots, where you have a tiny camera attached to the projectile, and you watch it in like a first person perspective, like flying at somebody, and then it hits them. I can't remember a movie doing that. So it was like, that really woke me up as far as like, this is really different. This is not something I'm used to.
Yeah, that arrow shot is definitely one of the ones that I pulled out too. And it looks like it's almost like they have somebody running with the just out of frame, running with the arrow to follow.
Yes.
It's like, how can we do this arrow in a really interesting way? And like, it looks like a kid could do that. It's like a homemade movie, you could do that. But it's definitely something you don't see, and so it just kind of jumps off the screen. You also have, and this is a thing that you would, had you seen the earlier movies too, the kind of the way they do the evil, right? That they hear this like howling sound, and then it's just first person running. All you see is like the camera is following Ash or whoever it's following, and kind of swinging back and forth, and like that's the way they portray like the big bad in these films. It's a pretty interesting and immersive way to do that.
Yeah, that I actually do remember that from the earlier films of what I've seen of them. So like, but that's still like pretty unusual, like cinematography. That's not something that's pretty common. Not that I can remember. I do feel like it reminds me, I see the resemblance between the horror scene in Spider-Man 2, also directed by Raimi, and the Evil Dead franchise. Like that,
the Doc Ock operating table thing.
Yes. Yeah. That definitely feels familiar.
Yeah. And, I wonder, and I'm assuming that it is, that a lot of this stuff is because it's cheap. Like they originally come up with that, the evil chasing you vibe, first person thing in the original Evil Dead, which is very much on the cheap. I mean, this movie was like $11 million, and that was a lot of money they spent on an Evil Dead movie. And it's kind of like the Jaws phenomenon, right? Like the less we see, the better. It just kind of comes out of necessity. We don't have the money to make a creature, and it would probably look dumb anyway. So let's do this.
And arguably the creature they have does look dumb. So,
oh yeah, no, most definitely. It's either a puppet or a stop motion action figure thing.
Yeah.
One thing that I loved about this movie, because I'm just a stickler for this, composition wise, was that at the end, the army of the Deadites attack from the right. That just made me so happy because I'm such a stickler for that. I'm like, yes, just like on Hoth, there it is. Because the bad guys come from the right and the good guys come from the left. That's how it's supposed to look.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to say, if I ever make a movie, I'm going to do the opposite, just for you.
You and Rian Johnson, darn it. Just have a reason for it. That's fine. Just have a reason. But yeah, I love the snap zooms, especially the one where he's putting his glove together and groovy.
Yeah,
that's just beautiful.
And that's in my opinion one of the better lines. Like that moment when because again, the power glove is just something totally unexpected. Like I mean, the chainsaw for hand, that was unusual.
Sure.
It kind of clues me in, right? But then it was like, it was just escalating into different levels of weirdness that I wasn't expecting. And the groovy, it reminds me of Din Djarin saying wizard, right? In The Mandalorian, where it's just like, okay, that's a good line. I like that.
Just cheesy enough to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of close-ups in this too. I mean, there's not a whole lot to see on the outside. You know, again, made on the cheap. A lot of close-ups of Ash's face. I really liked when he gets out of the pit and he's just kind of stalking back and forth, looking for somebody else to fight. That it kind of swings back. The camera kind of swings back and forth, and he's going like left to right. And he's magnetic. I mean, he's Bruce Campbell is absolutely not an A-list star, but in these type of films, like he owns the screen. He's super charismatic, and he may be the best special effect in the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean the close-ups, you mentioned it, the snap zooms. Normally, I'm not like a big fan of that, and Zack Snyder, I think, does that a lot, or has done it a lot in his work, and it really doesn't work for me. But for whatever reason, it did work for me in this film. I think it's like the campiness of it, the cheesiness of it, and the snap zooms feel cheesy to me, and so like it all kind of blended together. So like that worked.
And you know there's kind of a sound effect that goes with that too. Like it's always there's like a zoom sound whenever he's doing that too, just to kind of segue into sound effects. Unless you had anything else cinematography wise that you wanted to mention. We've talked a lot about the camera movements being super dynamic, lots of Dutch angles, which I always love Dutch angles. But
yeah,
what about sound?
Just the sound of like the, what is it, the shotgun that he has?
Yes, the boomstick.
Yeah, the boomstick. I'll be honest, like the music in this movie totally washed right over me, and I think that's because like the cinematography, the weirdness of the film, I found myself getting just kind of lost and being like, what is going to happen next? and the soundtrack, it flew right over me. Like, I think it was fine, but that was definitely playing second fiddle to the weirdness that was happening on the screen for me.
Yeah. You mentioned the gun. Was there something about the gun that
just that it was like when you think about like a joke and you have like comedic timing, this was sort of that joke where the gun is that comedy because it's like unexpected. It's kind of like the Indiana Jones when he pulls out the pistol and shoots the guy with the sword. Right. It's kind of the same scene, really. Like when I think about it, where it's like the guy's got the sword and you're like, okay, what's Ash gonna do? And then bam, sword, cut in half, and it's just like, so it's like using that sound as kind of the comedy right there.
Absolutely. And it's super loud.
Yeah.
Because it's the only gun, like in medieval times, of course. But it feels like they've just cranked it up to 11.
Yeah.
As well. It's super loud.
Yes. Well, it's just like, it's a fun use of sound effects as the punchline.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Indiana Jones too, which is kind of funny. Because I thought when he's in the pit at the beginning and he uses his belt to wrap it around chain and pulls him up, it very much sounded like, the Indiana Jones whip.
The whip, yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of fun. There's also some kind of Three Stooges sound effects in there, like when he's getting his eyes poked and stuff in the graveyard. There's like the bird circling around the head sound effect. And of course you get like the train whistle. It's cartoon. It's a live action cartoon, right?
It really
at the
is.
end, Evil Ash recognizes he's going to just get exploded. The train whistle and the top of his head pops up. And, yeah. You don't know what's coming.
No. It's a wild ride.
Everything's in play. And we also mentioned, under vocal sounds, the voiceover at the beginning and at the end. I always love that. My name is Ash. It's just so serious. And then I love the end. The end is my favorite part of the movie, which I'll get down to when I talk about dialogue. But I just love how he wraps it up with that. And of course, that's not, this is a good time as any to mention that this is not the director's cut. Sam Raimi, his preferred version, does not have that ending. There's a different ending so you've not seen it. So minor spoiler. So he drinks the juice and is supposed to say the words and he messes them up again. But this time he oversleeps like hundreds of years and wakes up in a cave and he's just like, oh no, I overslept. And that's how it ends. Versus we get another fight
back
in
at the S-Mart. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, that's my favorite part. Whatever.
Yeah.
What about performance? Anything that stood out to you?
I mean,
We
yeah.
talked about
Everything.
everything, very, very melodramatic.
Yeah.
Everything. You talk about our sliding scale, but that's the movie we're doing.
Yeah. And that's like this movie's a perfect example of like static and melodramatic aren't necessarily bad, but it's got to be like in the right kind of movie. This is the kind of movie where it's like that over the top melodramatic acting works perfectly. It complements the comedy of the film, and everyone is hamming it up, just regally. And like, I can't think of a single actor who's not being at least a little hammy. And I can't blame them. Like, taking a look at the movie, I can only imagine what it was like making it, where it's just like they're taking a giant swing at a plastic skeleton or plaster skeleton, and it's like, how's that gonna look? I don't know, just go over the top, like do your best.
Exactly. Yeah. I did think that, as much as they didn't spend a lot of money, the costuming is pretty good. I thought it felt fairly authentic. And I think that the evil Ash makeup is pretty fun. It kind of looks like he's got road rash because he took a shotgun blast to the face. Kind of like a raisin. It's kind of disgusting. And I always enjoy the stretched faces when he's trying to retrieve the book, and that one like sucks him down and he pulls himself up. And then it's a great gag too. Great sight gag. And like, he's fine except for his face is like 3 feet long.
Right.
Or what have you. And then he shakes and it changes multiple times. So those are fun. I'm wondering though, since this is your first time watching this, did you have a favorite quote or not? Or are there quotes, I should say? Because of course you had something you liked.
This is one of those movies that I don't feel like is super quotable for me.
Okay. That's fine. You've only seen it the one time.
Yeah. And again, like it's one of those movies where it's kind of overwhelming the first time you watch it. Like, there's a lot going on and things are coming out of left field like crazy. Like there was a lot to handle and try and like maintain like active viewing of like what was going on. I love the groovy line. I love the good, bad, I'm the guy with the gun.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's right at the end when he's talking to that in the S-Mart, the lady, where he's like, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. There's that kind of deadpan, sarcastic, biting humor. I think like, I don't want to say the script is like good, but it's like super effective in like that like crazy humor of like bringing us into kind of King Arthur's court, but like super violent, bloody, but like in a funny kind of way, if that makes sense.
No, totally. And what's funny too is, characterization wise, that Ash, Bruce Campbell's character, has evolved very much from the first movie, but not in like a natural way. Like, he's very much, very callow and very, very scared of what's happening and totally unaware of what's happening in the first movie. And then the second movie, he is kind of at the beginning, and you see in the kind of the flashback scene where he's talking over the exposition at the beginning, where he takes off his own hand. So he's kind of manned up at this point. You're like, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. And then by the time you get to the third movie, it's just like he has completely thrown the switch to like, now I'm Rambo.
Madman. Yes.
Oh, yeah, completely. Yeah. Like, he's super brave. He's still an idiot.
Yeah.
But that hasn't changed. But the stuff that comes out of his mouth is like, this was not Ash when I first met him. And so that just slayed me. Like, the "Hello, Mr. Fancy Pants" line is amazing. And just going off about like, this is my boomstick. It's a 12 gauge double barrel Remington. S-Mart stop at the line, rattles off this whole list of things. Like, he's still trying to sell the gun, which is amazing. But then you have just little tidbits here where, that first he's in the castle before he gets his hand, and then that old woman is possessed. She's like, I'll swallow your soul. And he's like, come get some. It's just like 80s action hero.
Super cheesy.
Give me some sugar, baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just going for it, absolutely. But yeah, and that last line you're talking about, she's like, who the hell are you? And he's like, name's Ash, housewares.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I mean. Like, of it's not like quotable. Like, it's not, these are not things I would say in my real life, but they're
Well,
still
no.
funny. Like, there's
Yeah.
still like good jokes and gags and stuff. And maybe some of that is also because like I'm not as familiar with the first two.
Yeah. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of memes that'll make a lot more sense now. Because there are things like "Hail to the King," baby. Little things that you see these things that just keep popping up uh, over and over again. But yeah, I don't know if it's quotable as much as every time I watch, I'm like, okay, he's going for it.
Yeah.
Like he's just chewing scenery and
And he's putting it
like you
out
said,
there.
good, bad. I'm the guy with the gun. You mentioned that earlier. Just probably the worst line in the film. Um, she said that when Sheila gets possessed, she says, "I may be bad, but I feel good." Like that's just so bad, but it's
But
also
again, it's kind of so
consistent
bad
with the
enough that
film.
it works. Yeah.
It's a groaner, but it's amazing. Uh, Anything else performance before we talk about setting and design?
I mean, I think that the setting and design matches the acting, which it feels over the top to me. There's like the fountain of blood when whoever that first person is gets thrown into the pit. So it's like
Yeah,
it's all this kind of crazy mix of just crazy. Um, the setting itself, I was not expecting King Arthur's court. Um, I was expecting something Cabin in the Woods,
right. Which is what the first two movies are.
and then I kept waiting for that to go back, and I was like, no, this is just going to be in King Arthur's court. Like that's the movie. It's like, okay. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like a weird version, and weird in the not in a bad sense, but like unusual, supernatural, weird, twisted kind of version of King Arthur's court, because you got the monsters and the skeletons and the do they call it the Necronomicon in it?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. They do.
yeah. So it's like this twisted, weird version of King Arthur's court. You mentioned you felt like the costuming was pretty good. I thought it was fine. Um, I wasn't particularly blown away by it, but again, and my wife walked in on me watching it, and she has never seen it, and she goes, "Is this Monty Python and the Holy Grail?" Like, it kind of feels like that. Like,
A little bit like
yeah,
a cousin.
not particularly like great, like in like a traditional cinematic sense, but it works for what they're doing.
Yeah. I meant to mention this earlier, but you mentioned, the King Arthur's court thing, is that I thought the music, and while it was kind of just wallpaper, didn't really stand out too much. But when I'm listening for it really intentionally, is that it does have kind of like a traditional medieval movie trope like Robin Hood or Ivanhoe and some of those things where lots of horns and woodwinds that
Mm-hmm.
it's trying to kind of borrow from that classic Hollywood feel for that to kind of make you buy in for the setting, which is very clearly in California. I can't not see California. There's one castle. That's all we get to see, and
Yeah,
then just like this forest and even the trees. I'm like, yeah, yeah, that's not
that's California.
medieval England. That's California, which is fine, except for like that stuff with a huge moon. That's clearly on a set,
Yeah.
but that's fine because it's supposed to be cheesy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they even howl at the moon, for crying out loud. There's like two buildings. So it's like a castle and a windmill.
Right. Again, I think the setting works because it's not very great. and like and I don't mean that in a bad way, and that's where it's kind of like tough with this movie, where it's a good bad film. It's bad. It doesn't look great, but that kind of lends itself to the fun of it because you don't take it seriously, and the movie isn't taking itself seriously. Uh, um, there was the moment, because it's tangential, but it's talking about props, where he's fighting down in the pit, and like there's like a random person that pops up out of the water or something like that, and starts fighting Ash, and then someone like throws the chainsaw down.
Yep.
And he like jumps up like Power Ranger style and like
Sure.
punches.
Yep. And it lands exactly on his hand.
And it like clicks into his hand. And I'm just like, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. This is cheesy as hell. It's bad. But that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. And then he lops off that creature's hand and
Yep.
it flies up and lands on the person's mouth.
Yep. And everyone laughs.
Yeah. So yeah, for props, of course, you had the Necronomicon. Actually, 3 of them, right?
Mhm.
Chainsaw. You get the boomstick. I love the scene with the kettle full of boiling water. That's because that makes a lot of sense. Like that little tiny ash went down his throat, and so he just decides to pour boiling water down his throat to get him.
Yeah.
Or like pry his face off the stove or the off the fireplace.
Yeah.
The high school chemistry book, that always makes me laugh too. That's like, this is how we're going to figure this out. There's a lot of stuff in the back of that Oldsmobile.
It's just nuts. The whole thing is just insane.
Yeah. I'm not sure how he got the Oldsmobile working again.
Yeah.
Maybe there was stuff in the high school chemistry book for that. I don't know.
There's
I always forget that it comes back.
There's a lot of things in this movie where I'm like, I have no idea how he got like the car working with like the windmill, and it's like the helicopter blade spinning and killing skeletons. It's like, how? I don't know. It's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's not.
No,
it's
a movie
not
with
supposed to make
zombies.
sense.
Yeah, no, there's magic and zombies in the book and skeletons that are alive. Chainsaw, like time travel.
Yeah.
Like we really shouldn't be picking nits about how the mechanics of this Oldsmobile that fell from the sky.
If you're picking nits, you're not understanding the movie.
No, you've missed it. The cast, it's pretty limited actually. Bruce Campbell does double duty, of course, as Ash and Evil Ash,
Right.
which is fun. And I think is great as both. I think he's believable as both. He's absolutely the star of this. I mean, I think the DVD version that I have of this is actually called Bruce Campbell versus the Army of Darkness. Like he's got that much top billing. There's different versions of that.
Yeah.
Which you watched it? Did you watch it on HBO Max?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, because I wanted to make a plug. I was like, it's on HBO Max, so it's really easy for
People
our listeners to go find it because it's not like probably at the top of most people's list at the
wasn't on mine
or whatnot. But it's there.
Yeah, it is now. Yeah.
Yeah. So other than that, I mean, people that you've seen Bruce Campbell, you've probably seen him in a bunch of stuff and didn't know. If you've seen the Spider-Man movies, he's in there, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Bette Davis, she's actually plays Peter Parker's mom in the Andrew Garfield movies.
Oh,
That's,
I did not know that.
The thing I've ever seen her in. And then Ian Abercrombie, who plays like the old wise guy with the beard, who's strange one. That guy, he's been in a lot of stuff as well. But other than that, I'm like, oh, and Bridget Fonda has a small little part at the beginning as Linda, which is fun too, because if you've seen the other movies, there's 3 different Lindas. Well, it's all the same Linda, but it's played by different people because they don't care about continuity or don't have the rights or both. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Small little cast. I mean, it's still, even though this is a major Hollywood movie, it still is. It's a Universal film. It still kind of feels like a college film or a
very much
couple
so.
kids in their backyard.
Yeah. It feels like,
and of course,
it feels like a little above that. You know what I mean?
just a little.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, and Ted Raimi. I forgot that. Yeah, Sam's brother, Ted Raimi, is also. He plays multiple things. He's a cowardly warrior. He's also an S-Mart clerk. He's the one that, well, why didn't you stay and all that stuff. He's in there a couple times. You can have my steel, which that scene too reminds me of like Lord of the Rings a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, and my axe.
Yes.
So,
little like reminders of like other films, little inspirations here and there.
Yeah. Very nice. Other than that, I did mention, the hero's journey, as far as hero's journey goes, that it did progress. Ash's character did progress from the first film quite a bit, and it is worth watching the other films. I think I like Dead by Dawn just fine. It's super bloody.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, like we get the gushing blood coming out of that pit. That happens a lot.
Yeah.
And of course, Ash cuts off his own hand, which is fun. But it's kind of a horror comedy mixture where Evil Dead is like not supposed to be funny.
No,
but it is. But just to see Ash's character change and you get that payoff, I think, for Army of Darkness. And I know there's there's a television show, Ash versus the Evil Dead, that comes after this. But for me, this is the end. There's more, but yeah, this is as far as I'm concerned. This is where Ash ends up.
Mm-hmm. I think that the film overall is like a lot of fun, and that's the best thing I can say about it. Is I was entertained through the whole thing because you mentioned at the beginning there's kind of a prologue, like narration, kind of. There's not much. There's a little bit, but it pretty much jumps straight to it and kind of kicks off like right away, and it doesn't really let up the whole movie. Like it's chugging along, crazy things are happening left and right. It was entertaining. It was funny. There's I don't want to say like good action, but like it was entertaining action, and that's I really did enjoy the movie, but at the same time, it's like that. It's one of the most perfect examples of a good bad film out there that I can think of off the top of my head, where it is not like for me, it's not an award winner, but it was like a perfect popcorn film, a perfect summer movie where you're going to put something on and have a big bowl of popcorn and a beer and just forget about everything else and just enjoy the roller coaster for like an hour and a half.
Yeah, it's pretty lean.
Yeah.
I think it's like 82 minutes.
Yeah, it's pretty short.
It's really short. Even the director's cut's like 15 minutes longer.
Yeah.
And there's a couple more things in there, but like I said, I like this version better. So there's really no wasted space. So if you're gonna force someone to watch a movie, you're like, hey, I want a movie for you to watch, this would be a pretty good one to go with because they won't have to wait very long and there's no downtime.
Yes. Yeah, the payoff is it comes quick.
Yeah. And it ends in that great scene in the S Mart, which I love so very much. Hell with the King, baby. And it's funny, you mentioned I'm moving on into our final thoughts. I think we're naturally wrapping up. Is that it actually did win the Saturn Award for Best Horror Film in '94.
Did it really?
I mean, that's not it's not an Academy Award.
No,
it's not a super prestigious award, but it still did win something, and it is still, at almost 30 years old now, still held in pretty high esteem, at least in the nerd community. So that's fun.
Yeah, I mean, I get it because it is tremendously fun.
It's a fun movie, people. If you haven't seen it in forever, it's on HBO Max. It's not hard to find. It's definitely worth a rewatch, I think.
So as we close, we just want to say thank you so much for listening. If you would like to connect with us, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook. Email us at readingbetweenreels@gmail.com or use the SpeakPipe app on our website.
And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast catcher. We'd love to hear your feedback, and it really helps us get the word out about the podcast. And of course, if you haven't yet, please join our Facebook group. It's a safe place to share your thoughts and discuss all things related to movies.
One last thing, our next episode will be a review of Doctor Strange. Send us an email or voicemail about your favorite moments from the movie, and we'll share them on the next episode.